Greetings everyone and welcome to this webinar. Today we will be discussing about minimizing the documentation in a QMS system. My name is Arta Lamani, the PECB organizer of this webinar, and the guest for today is Debra Hampton, PECB certified trainer and lead auditor of quality and environmental management systems. Please write your questions and comments in the question box in the right-hand control panel, and Debra will answer to them accordingly at the end of the presentation. Please, Debra, you may start the presentation.
Thank you so much, Arta. Welcome, everyone. I'm excited to have you in today to listen. Our presentation will take about 30 minutes, and then after we finish the presentation, if you'd like for more people in your organization to have an opportunity to see this, you will be able to take them to the YouTube. There will be a link that is available through PECB, and you will be able to experience this again. I'm going to begin by saying to you some of the things that have been said to me. I've been talking about this and working this way and helping companies to implement ISO 9001-2008 systems of 50 pages or less for quite a few years now, and I'm forever getting the comment about, oh, this can't be done, or why our quality manual's 30 pages and you're talking about having all the documentation in the system being 50 documents. In a small company, it might be possible, but there's no way that you could do something like this with a large organization. I hear these things, but I've found that they're not always true. Let's go on and talk about why 50 pages aren't common. I've given a lot of thought to this, and I think I boiled it down to I don't think most people read the standard. I know that sounds simplistic, but that's really true to me. Too many people just don't comprehend what they read. Let's read the standard because it clearly states what is required. If you have your standard or make a note, go to 4.2.2 where it talks about the requirements for a quality manual. There are really only 3 requirements to be in that quality manual. It requires you to have a scope, and if you are going to exclude anything, you have to justify why you're excluding. It requires you to have documented procedures, or it requires you to reference them, so you either have your documented procedure in the quality manual or you reference them. And then it requires you to have a description of the interaction of the processes. So let's think about it this way. Remember, the standard requires in 4.2.2a that we talk about the scope of the quality management system, including details of or any justification for exclusions. We could actually, in one sentence, say what needs to be said. If we were an organization and we said our scope is the design, manufacture, and distribution of things, widgets, whatever we happen to be manufacturing, that scope is one sentence and would meet that requirement of the standard. The second requirement of the standard is that the documented procedures be established or either reference them. So if we said that our documented procedures could be found in folder QMS on our server or in such and such folder, then we would have met that requirement. Or if we wanted to, we might just make a list of our documented procedures. The next thing the standard is requiring is a description of the interaction between the processes of the quality management system. So we might even have a sentence that is our quality manual that says, click here to see the picture that describes the interaction of the quality management system. I'm truly swinging the pendulum as far as possible to show you that in 3 sentences, if you were auditing this manual and it only had 3 sentences, would it meet the requirements of the ISO 9001-2008 standard? The answer is yes. So we could actually have a quality manual that was only 3 sentences. Now to me that would be a little, too few. So I'm going to show you an example of what we typically will use as a quality manual. In organizations where I have been managers, so instead of a list of documented where they are in our QMS, we have just stated them. So we then have a picture on our quality manual that shows how we as an organization will put effort in to get profit out of our organization. When I'm explaining my quality manual to customers, I will say our effort in goes into the river. There's a river running through the organization. Turning effort into dollars using the processes listed in the river. The first one that we see in the river is design and development in this particular organization, so they don't have any exclusions. Then they have quotes and orders. Then they manufacture and they ship an invoice. This river depicts how they feed each other. The other thing that we show as an example is we show the supporting processes as the processes lined up along the side of the river. You can't do much manufacturing if you don't have the materials. So there's a process where we obtain the materials, we control the materials to support the manufacturing process. If we don't control our equipment, we can't manufacture. So we will, again, have a support process for control of equipment. If we don't have competent people, we can't do any of the processes, the supporting nor the main processes. So this is an example of telling how our organization works, and very good example. Now I use a river in this particular example. You may want to use a tree. A tree may fit better with your organization. If you make tractors, the engine the powertrain might be what you are showing how the effort in turns into dollars. If you wanted to understand more about the effort in and dollars, I have a book that's called Turning Effort into Dollars. It's available on Amazon.com. It goes into this philosophy and might be something you can use to help other people and yourself to understand this philosophy. Bottom line, this is an example of a quality manual. It's been audited many times by third-party auditors, and it's how you can turn your quality manual into one page. I want to remind you, if you have questions, please hold till the end. Jot them down so you don't forget them, but we do want to answer your questions, and we will be answering those at the end of this presentation. So now, we talked about this being the manual. Typically, I will do 2 more things when I'm working with a client. I'll add a quality policy to my manual strictly because I want some place that policy is documented, that I have control of. Yes, I'm going to post it around the facility, but I also want to make sure that that policy is clear in my manual, and then we want to add our objectives also. So let's keep count. We have 1-page quality manual. We talked about that each one of those processes represented in our quality manual is going to need to be documented in some way, because if you go to 4.2.1d in your manual, it says all the processes necessary for the control, all of the, that you must document the processes necessary to control the planning, implementation, and control. So how are we going to do those? Well, the standard again is very clear if we read the standard. We talked about 4.2.2, but here is 4.1. Let's look at what it says must be documented for each process. Let me call your attention to 4.1a. 4.A just says that we must determine the processes needed for the quality management system. Hear the difference here between the word system and the word process. We identified all the processes needed for the quality management system in the quality manual. Now, B through F relate to what must be identified in each process. So in each process, we must determine the sequence and interaction of the process, the criteria and methods used to ensure the operation and control of the processes are effective. Let me translate 4.1c. Criteria and methods are forms and work instructions. Forms, work instructions, Excel spreadsheets that ensure the operation and control of the processes are effective. 4.1d says that we must include in our documented processes the availability of resources and information, the operation and monitoring of these processes. Again, translating this, if you're in a manufacturing organizations in my experience, most often have a daily, at least a weekly meeting where they talk about, okay, we need to ship this item on such and such a date. Do we have all the raw materials we need? There's that communication, that moment where you talk about the availability of resources. That's also when you might say, hey, we've got a lot of orders increasing, therefore we're going to need to add people. Those daily or weekly, that's an example of a resource time that you have in a manufacturing process. We have E, which is monitoring and measuring, as well as analyzing the processes. There is a word here, where applicable. Let me encourage you as you're documenting your processes that where applicable becomes where you possibly can always monitor and measure. What you monitor and measure, you will improve. So I know it says where applicable here, but I truly encourage people to find ways to monitor and measure as much as possible. And then our last one is to implement actions necessary to achieve planned results and continual improvement of these processes. So when we're defining our processes, documenting our processes, we must make sure that the I-4.1 or method we choose is going to be our method to document our processes. Traditionally, people '84 versions of the standard. Some people have gone to flowcharting, still very traditional and do not get the job done. What I want to introduce you to here, if you have not seen before, is something called deployment flowcharting. Deployment flowcharting is a graphical representation of the flow of the process. It still is a flow chart. It's a type of flow chart, but it includes the responsibility for the steps as well as the inputs and the outputs. It's a more graphical representation than a traditional flow chart. There's a lot of value with the deployment flow charts. I think you will find as you use them over time. One, they help you to see unnecessary data collection steps. I'm going to show you the picture of one. This is an example of a deployment flow chart for manufacturing. I want to bring your attention to how the open orders list from the scheduler is looked at, examined, and the person says, has the order already been scheduled? Yes. Then I just move to this step. If not, I go in this direction, and we're going to look at our criteria and method, which is the standard lead time. Please notice that the standard lead time is bold and italics. I could have turned them yellow. But the point is, I've made sure that if it is criteria and methods used to support the process, I highlight it in some way. It shows that if we go into this step, the manufacturing supervisor is going to prepare the packages, give them to the operator. The operator is going to work through, many various operators might work, creating product that's ready for shipping, and then even tells us what we do with our paperwork. Our materials manager is feeding into this process. So this is an example of a deployment flowchart. I want to bring your attention to one thing, that there is a process owner specified as well as a process objective, and all of us who are used to our quality field know that there's also a rev and a date on it. So just a few more characteristics of that deployment flow chart, and this is one of the secrets, I think, to making less than 50 pages in your quality management system. Having that process owner defined, the process objective is stated, noting your inputs and outputs, showing interaction, as well as defining who is responsible for what. If you want an example of this or an example of a quality manual, just send me an email after this presentation. My email is Debra at ce-q.com, and I'll be glad to send you a copy. So looking again at our deployment flow chart, one of the things I want to point out again is that a deployment flow chart specifies a process owner and a process objective. It also talks about the inputs. Notice that the scheduler has an input, but also the materials manager has an input, as well as their outputs. We have, in our deployment flowchart here, we made an oval for inputs and outputs. The next thing is we see the interaction of the processes because it tells us who is helping to support that operator. I really like the way this deployment flowchart works because it shows how we are all here to support that operator. And then the last thing that is special about a deployment flowchart is it tells who the players are in the process. Just a quick word about what a process owner does. The process owner is responsible for making sure that this deployment flowchart is accurately defined. They are responsible for talking to the materials manager, the operator, the manufacturing supervisor, the scheduler, and saying, hey, we're a team here. Is this the way we want to do our process? They're the lead. They're not responsible for every step. They don't do every step, but they're responsible for making sure that the process flows accurately. If you remember in 4.2.3, it talks about approval when you make a change to documentation. 4.2.3 talks about making sure you've got an approval. Well, if you're going to make a change to this process map, then you would want to make sure that your people got the production supervisor's input and approval before any changes were made to this process. So let's think about this. Did our deployment flow chart address the requirements of the standard? Well, in our manual, we met 4.1a. Does it determine the sequence and interaction? Yes, very well. Probably better than a traditional procedure. It also has criteria and methods. Remember, we saw building packages. Anything that was in bold or in italics was criteria and methods. And then does it ensure the availability of resources? Yes, we even made sure kits were ready if you read down into the process. But we did not address monitoring and measuring, and we did not address actions, so we still need something else. The deployment flowchart's not meeting all the requirements of the standard. So let's go back to our deployment flowchart and add one diagram. If we add a diagram here that says what we do to monitor and measure and what we do to improve, we've said we're going to look at our on time to schedule, that's what we're going to monitor and measure, and also our non-conforming material. And from those, we're going to plot paths towards improvement. So this makes our deployment flowchart meet all of the requirements of the standard. We've met the requirements of the ISO 9001-2008 standard, but could we do this? Have we kept the pages to less than 50? Let's look at that. And we had our one-page quality manual. We had 12, if you went back to our manual and counted them, we had 12 processes. And I'm just estimating, honestly, this is high. I rarely see 3 documents for every form or work instruction, but just in case we did, you would see that we have 49 or less documents in our quality management system. So it is possible. If you want to receive a copy of this, you can please email me. Now, can we do this with ISO 9001-2015? New standard coming. Many of you probably have already purchased a copy. Think about it. ISO 9001-2015 does not require a manual. It does not require any documented procedures. It has more requirements for what a process must address, but quite honestly, I think in our quality management systems we're going to still have to have some glue to help us know what we're doing. I don't think we can do it without the stability that that quality manual brought to us. So this is what I'm thinking. Of course, no one has been audited to ISO 9001-2015, so my thoughts have not been tested by another third-party auditor. Although I am a third-party auditor, I do audit for some registrars. What I am thinking that I will do when I am helping a company get ready for the 2015 standard is to list the processes in a spreadsheet. Then list the risk that we might possibly encounter in that process. These are risks of not performing the process well. Risk to us as well as risk to our customers. You might even want to have one column for risk to us and one for risk to customers. So if we list our risk in the second column, and in our third column we put controls to mitigate. Using our thinking from our deployment flowcharts, anytime there is a criteria or method used as a control to mitigate, a form, a document, a spreadsheet, underlining those or italicizing them. And in some cases, we may say that we're going to have a process map. For example, the supplier selection process, the receiving inspection process would be used to mitigate that particular risk. I am thinking, oh, I forgot to mention that. Also in the 2015 standard, it doesn't say control of records, it doesn't say control of documents. Instead, it's talking about documented information. So we've also put in parentheses any documented information that we want to emphasize that are being used to mitigate some of the risk that we are encountering. So if we take this approach of using the spreadsheet and columns and rows, we'd have one document, which is one page, possibly more than one here, but it's not going to be too much. And I'm seeing one or two documents for each process. So we may even be less than, I may be coming back years from now saying, hey, how you can make an effective quality management system with less than 25 documents. I want to emphasize this has not been audited by a third-party auditor yet. I think we're all still learning what that ISO 9001:2015 says and requires. Getting ready to wrap up this presentation to you this morning, I want to quote to you from Albert Einstein. Albert Einstein is known for being one of the smartest men who ever lived, and he has said, any intelligent fool can make things bigger and more complex. It takes a stroke of genius and a lot of courage to move in the opposite direction. You may be like me. I don't know if I have a stroke of genius, but I've got a lot of courage, and I'm willing to move in the opposite direction. I'm willing to read my standard and see what it says. So that's what I'm encouraging you to do. Giving you a quote from another man that I have a lot of admiration for, who's modern day. He says, complexity is our enemy. Any fool can make something complicated. It's hard to make something simple. So what I'm challenging you to do, making something simple, it will be better for you, but it is difficult. It's easier to read, it's easier to communicate to others, it's easier to follow, it's easier to edit when needed. I said it's easier to audit. It's quicker to audit. It saves you investments in auditing time, and you can have more confidence in your auditing results. Our slogan has been Foundations for Your Future. We've been at this since 1984. We want to help you minimize your documentation, and we've even done it with companies remotely using Skype, GoToMeeting, or other modern technology, so we can give you a quote in helping you understand how to minimize your documentation. You can get in touch with us. I want to thank you for participating today. Don't forget, if you'd like to get some examples of these, please feel free to get in touch with me, and I will send them to you. If you have any questions now, I'd love to entertain them. Arta and Tim, PECB, I want to thank you for giving me the honor and the opportunity to make this presentation today. Are there any questions?
Thank you, Debra, for this presentation. And yes, we do have some questions. We will go ahead and continue some of the questions. Here, Debra, I have an attendee that is implying that the documentation is required and that it is more important to have proper documentation rather than to reduce it. So so I'm going to go ahead and unmute this attendee, and he can further comment his impliances. Is that all right?
Yes.
Okay, just a sec.
Hello? So I'm going to answer this question. Can you hear me, Arta? I'm not hearing the participant, but let me answer this question. I totally agree with the gentleman or the person. Proper documentation is essential. There was nothing said to say that you don't properly document. But you can properly document and still minimize the documentation. The next question, Arta. Arta, is there another question? Hello?
Sorry, Debra. It seems Arta is having some internet connection problems.
Okay.
So yes, we were trying to unmute Mark to do the discussion, but it seems it is impossible.
Okay.
So I will continue reading the questions to you.
Okay.
One of the questions is, how has your clients justified this one-page manual with their customers, such as oil companies or construction?
Very good question. I had this actually from a very large oil company just recently. And one of the things that I saw a client of mine do, they turned their quality manual into a marketing tool. And in order to do that, they added some more information, but it wasn't necessary for us to control the quality management system, but it was something that the marketing department wanted to do to use as a marketing tool. So I have no problem with that. Most of us don't use our quality manual as a marketing tool. And if your customers have any question about it, I think they will be impressed with your knowledge of your system if you explain it. Next question.
Okay, Debra, can you hear me now?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, great. All right. I have a person that has raised their hand. I'm going to go ahead and unmute them and they can ask their question.
Okay.
Chris Boone, can you hear me? If you can, go ahead and ask your question.
Yeah, I only had an issue with Debra fading in and out audibly during the early parts of the presentation, so that was why I raised my hand. Thank you.
Oh.
Okay, I'm very sorry about that. Yes, there was some technical issues. We also have another hand raised by Simone Bell. I'm going to go ahead and unmute him and he can ask his question. Simone, go ahead.
Hi, good morning, Debra. I'm interested in the deployment process chart, and I wanted to know what factors you take into consideration when developing the chart to make it simpler.
Okay, very good question, Simone. I use this example when I'm helping people. You've been on this webinar for 30 minutes or so. I haven't told you to breathe. You've been breathing. So anything that is a natural reaction, I don't document that on the process map. Instead, I want to document the things that are essential to me to control the process, to ensure that it's effective. I use the example also that I might tell you to drive to New York City. It's important to me that you arrive in New York City on a certain date and a certain time, but what path you take to get there is not as critical to me. Sometimes it's critical that you take a certain path, and if it's critical, then I'm going to specify that. I guess what I'm trying to answer with this, Simone, is that there's not a surefire answer. Each process you have to think about what it is that you require in the organization, what you require to occur, and only document those things that are essential to the process.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Next question. Arta, are we finished with questions? Are those all of them?
Now I have another hand raised by Kathy Thomas. I'm going to go ahead and unmute her and she can ask her question. Kathy, go ahead. Seems that she hasn't. Her mic is not working, so I'm going to go ahead and move on to the next question, which is it true that the 2015 version of ISO 9001 does not require a quality manual?
It is true. Sorry. I know, it's shocking to so many of us, but it is true. It does not require a quality manual.
Okay, another one is risk management sufficient to replace manual quality?
I think that's an interesting question. We have always been doing risk management. It's not new to us. Everything we did was to reduce the risk to our customer. So risk management is being seen as the method. If you look at most of your quality manuals, I've been a third-party auditor for many, many, many years, and I've rarely seen a quality manual that has any value. Most people in the organization never turn to the quality manual for any help. So I question why we ever even had them in the first place. Go ahead.
Okay, the next question is, I have moved to the flowchart process and I really like it. My concerns are with the 2015 standards. Will much change? I was under the impression that you would only require the input and output.
It also requires you to include the risk. So if there's one more, I think there's 3 more requirements with the 2015 standard. Definitely not an expert on that standard yet, but it requires you to think about inputs, outputs, and also risk. Seems like there's one other thing that it also requires. But look at your new 2015 standard on that. Next question.
Okay. The next question is, Dear Debra, have you had a second or a third-party audit with these documents?
Yes, many, many, many. And I've never, anytime I have helped a company implement ISO 9001, I have never, ever on our stage 1 or stage 2 had a nonconformity using this thought process. That's in next question.
Okay, next question is, if 2015 does not require a manual or documented procedures, then how do you audit it?
You would, if I were auditing using the philosophy that I just showed you, where you had a spreadsheet that showed your processes, your risk addressed, and then the controls. I'm also a 14,001 and 18,001 auditor, so I'm used to auditing risk standards. And in those, you audit to make sure that the controls to mitigate the risk have been put in place and that they are effectively addressing the issues, that they are effectively implemented and maintained. So it's going to be the same kind of thing. You're going to use that laundry list of controls to go out and verify that those processes are truly effectively implemented and maintained. Next question.
Next question is, if our certification expires on 2016, do we need to recertificate with the new version?
You're going to have to talk to your third-party registrar regarding that. Each registrar is setting up their own decisions on that. Some registrars are not re-registering to the 2008 standard over the next 3 years. Some have made the decision that they will they will re-register to 2008 until the last year. So you're going to just have to talk to your registration body on that. Next question.
Okay, thank you. How long can we expect for the 2015 standard requirements to flow through the other standards that incorporate it?
Arta, I'm not sure if you finished that question or not, but I think what the participant is asking is, I think you will see, matter of fact, that's the movement of the ISO, the International Organization for Standardizations.
Yes, an example that was given was the AS 9120, for example.
Okay. The AS 9100, that one I know does not, they're planning on October 2016 for that one, and I believe it's the same date for TS as well as for the railroad standard. Railroad is even considering not going to it, but I think that will change over time. I also implement to ISO AS as well as TS, so they're going to be about a year behind us, and I don't know how they will do that. Probably will be giving you a 2-year implementation on the ISO 9001 requirements, and then the 3rd year would be for finishing up if there are any requirements that change for the AS 9100. AS 9100 already had risk management in it. TS also already had risk management in it, so those organizations are not going to see huge changes. Go ahead.
Okay. One of the key challenges we have is dealing with incompetent auditors from customers. How do you convince such people to accept your documentation?
Wow. I totally agree. The only hope you've got is to, when they ask you for something that you know is not a requirement in the standard, ask them to show you where it's a requirement in their documentation. And if they can't show you, I would encourage you to appeal their decisions to their supervisors, to someone above them. It's a pet peeve of mine also. It's very frustrating that we have a lot of customer auditors who do not know the standard, do not know the requirements, and put things on us that are not valid, do not add any value. I had one just recently that required a document for who the quality management rep was, and I said, show me whether that's a requirement in your system. And he couldn't, and therefore I said, if you write that, I will appeal it to your supervisor, and he will not support you, not when I'm done with my letter. So he let it go. You just have to stand strong, because they're individuals and they're not going to pay for it, and it's ridiculous. Pet peeve, you got me on one. So next question.
Next question is, when designing your flowchart, if you do have your input and output in an oval shape, is that wrong, or is the oval input and output just a preference?
You could make it a different color. It's just what I did. It's not wrong to have it a different shape. Next question.
Next question is, QM is one thing, implementation is another. Why do you prefer minimum number of pages?
Because it costs your company less when you talk about auditing and when you talk about making changes. When I see an organization that has a lot of documents, when I'm a third-party auditor, I know that they probably don't know what's in their documents. Very few times do they. I did a study when at one point I worked for John Deere, and one of the studies we did was to find out how much a document cost us. And it was around $5,000, and this was in the 80s. Even if that's still true, one document cost you around $5,000 to maintain, not just to create, just create, maintain. You're spending a lot of money on putting words on paper. It will cost you less in maintenance if you have fewer words on paper. Thank you. Next question.
Okay, Deborah, thank you for this informative and helpful presentation. And thank you everyone for your questions. Because of the time limited, we have to conclude this presentation. You can send your questions through email and we will answer to them individually. I want to thank all the attendees as well for taking the time out of your busy schedules to join us. We hope you enjoyed this webinar. Please check PECB's webinar schedule in our website www.pecb.com or our official social media network, since next week we are organizing webinars on interesting topics. Next Monday we are hosting a webinar on the topic Hands-on Medical Risk Assessment. Thank you. And Deborah, again, I would like to thank you for this helpful presentation.
Thank you so much for letting me be part of this.
Our pleasure.
Bye-bye.